He should have died. The blade had been sharp. Sir Ilan hadn't trembled. The headsman's swing had been clean and final. Ned Stark had felt the cold wind of death sweep over him before the steel found his neck. He'd closed his eyes, thinking of Winterfell, of the snow-covered godswood, of the smell of pine and smoke. He'd whispered a final prayer not to the Seven, nor to the old gods of the north, but to his wife and children wherever they were. Then, nothing. But death didn't last. There was heat, blistering, suffocating heat. At first he thought he was in some cruel hell for traitors and broken men. Flames licked around him, but they did not burn. He opened his eyes and saw only fire, not just fire, light. It shimmered gold and red, alive with whispers and visions and voices too ancient to name. Then came the pain, not from his wounds, but deep inside, like his very soul was being melted and reshaped. A woman's voice cut through the roar. Calm, powerful, not Catelyn's. You were not meant to die here, Stark. You were meant to serve. Her face flickered into view, red robes, shadowed eyes, lips stained like fresh blood. Melisandre. He knew her by name, though they'd never met. He tried to speak, but his mouth was ash and silence. The Lord of Light has need of you, she said. He reached into the dark and pulled you from death's grip. You have seen the false ways of men. You have lived by honor. Now you will burn by purpose. He remembered dying. He remembered pain. But now something else lived inside him, a warmth that didn't fade, a light that refused to dim. When he awoke again, it was night. Cold stars blinked overhead. He lay in a cave surrounded by strange men in rags, and by her. You were gone. For 3 days, Melisandre whispered, as if afraid the truth might be too much. They buried your body beneath the sept. I pulled you out when the city burned. The Lord showed me your name in the flames. I've waited a long time for you. Ned tried to sit up. His body was whole. His head rested where it should. No scar, no blood, just the smell of fire. What have you done? He rasped. I've fulfilled prophecy. You are Azor Ahai reborn, champion of the light, the one who will lead men against the long night. He didn't believe her. He didn't believe in gods that chose men like toys or burned children for visions. But something in him had changed. His dreams were filled with flame. He saw things before they happened. He felt the cold winds of the north growing stronger, heard whispers of white shadows in the woods. He saw his own face in those dreams, wreathed in fire, wielding a sword that pulsed with living heat. In secret, they left the city. King's Landing had turned to chaos after his execution. Joffrey's madness had driven the court into fear. The streets burned, and the poor chanted of false kings and old gods returning. No one noticed a man who looked like Ned Stark, cloaked in rags, slipping through shadows. He didn't return to Winterfell. Not yet. The North was at war. Robb had raised the banners, thinking his father dead. Arya and Sansa were lost. Jon was on the wall, and he had been chosen for something far greater than reclaiming his home. You must learn the power, Melisandre told him. You must wield Lightbringer. I don't care for swords. I care for my children, he replied. But if you don't fight the darkness, there will be nothing left for them to live in. He hated the fire, hated that he lived while so many good men had died. Yet every time he looked into the flames, he saw truth. The White Walkers had begun to stir. A boy with dragon blood lived across the sea. A bastard on the wall held secrets that could shatter kingdoms. Ned Stark was no longer just the Warden of the North. He was something more, and the fire inside him wasn't going out, not until the world was reborn in light. The journey north was slow, and every step weighed on Ned Stark like a burden. He had walked these roads before as Warden of the North, with honor and duty as his only companions. Now he walked with fire in his veins, with whispers of prophecy in his ear, and with Melisandre always at his side. She called him reborn. She called him chosen. But Ned called himself cursed. In the villages they passed, the people stared at him. Some swore they saw his face already mounted on spikes in the Red Keep. Others whispered that ghosts walked in his shape. Once a man spat at him, calling him a traitor who had bent the knee and shamed the North. Ned didn't strike him down. He simply lowered his hood and kept walking, his honor still alive, though his heart burned with unrest. At night, the dreams came, dreams that were not dreams, but visions. He saw Rob crowned with the direwolf crown, but always the crown dripped blood. He saw Arya with a blade, her hands shaking as she drove it into a man's throat. He saw Jon, snow at the wall, staring into a darkness alive with eyes colder than death. And always, always, he saw a great shadow of wings covering the land, fire against ice, light against dark. One night, when the fire crackled low, Melisandre spoke. Without looking at him, you fight it still. I do. You believe yourself a man of honor. But honor does not win wars. Honor lost your head. Ned turned to her, his face grim. And what would you have me be? A butcher of children? A king of ash? My honor may have cost me my life, but I would rather lose my head 100 times than my soul once. Her lips curved, not in a smile, but in something sharper. And yet here you sit, reborn. Perhaps your honor was never enough. Perhaps that is why the Lord chose you. You will burn away what you once were, and only then will you become what is needed. Ned said nothing, but when she slept, he stared into the fire. And for the first time, he feared she might be right. When they reached the Riverlands, word came like storm winds. Robb Stark, his son, had won battles and won the loyalty of lords. They called him king in the north. The wolf banners rose again. Ned's heart swelled with pride and broke with sorrow. His son fought a war believing his father was dead. If Ned revealed himself, would it strengthen Robb or shatter the North's cause entirely? Melisandre's counsel was clear. You cannot reveal yourself yet. The boy fights for the living, but he does not understand the true enemy. Your path lies beyond his war. Your son's crown will be of no use if the world is swallowed by night. But the thought of Robb, young, proud, carrying the weight of a kingdom, kept Ned awake. He wanted to ride to him, to warn him, to embrace him. Yet the flames showed only tragedy if father and son met too soon. In Harrenhal's ruins, they found shelter for a time. Blackened stone, melted by dragonfire centuries ago, loomed around them like a graveyard of kings. It was there that Melisandre gave him the sword. The blade looked like no other. Its edge shimmered as if alive, the steel glowing faintly, pulsing with a heat that never faded. She called it Lightbringer. Ned did not want it. The weight of ice and snow, of old steel and the cold gods, had always been his strength. But when he held the sword, it sang. Not in sound, but in memory. The fire within him surged to meet it, as if it had waited for him since the first dawn. This is your burden, Melisandre said. You must learn to wield it. He swung once, and the very air seemed to crackle. The flames of the nearby torches bent toward the sword, like servants bowing to their lord. Ned clenched his jaw. This is no man's weapon. This is a curse. Melisandre's eyes burned like embers. It is both, and with it you will kill the dead. That night his dreams changed again. No longer did he see just his children or his son's crown. He saw the wall shattering under endless waves of pale figures. He saw Winterfell burning, not from southern swords, but from the breath of ice. He saw himself standing at the heart of the storm, Lightbringer blazing in his hand, a wolf made of fire at his side. When he woke, sweat drenched him though the night was cold. He whispered into the dark, "Old gods, forgive me." But no answer came, only the crackling fire that never let him rest. Snow fell hard and heavy by the time Ned Stark and Melisandre reached the lands near the neck. The chill cut through his furs, but strangely the cold never truly touched him anymore. The fire within, the one he cursed, the one he feared, always kept him warm. Travellers they passed whispered of war, of Lannisters burning the Riverlands, of Robb Stark sweeping south with wolves at his back. Ned listened in silence, every word a knife in his chest. His son fought for him, for vengeance, for the family he believed betrayed and slaughtered. Yet Ned could not ride to his side. Not yet. "The North must not know of you," Melisandre warned again. "If you reveal yourself now, you will divide their faith. You are no longer simply Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell. You are something greater, something they will not understand, not yet." "And my son?" Ned asked quietly, his voice taut. "He fights alone." "He fights a war that does not matter," Melisandre said with calm cruelty. "The true war is beyond the wall, and your bastard son, he will play a greater part in it than any crown Robb wears." Ned's fists clenched. He hated her words, hated her for speaking them. Yet deep in the flames of his dreams, he had seen it too. Jon standing in the snow, sword raised against shadows that did not bleed. At Moat Cailin, they found the ruin, nearly empty, save for a few desperate sellswords and starving men. There, Ned met the first challenge of his rebirth. A gang of brigands blocked their path through the swamp road, 5 of them, clad in rusted mail and clutching spears. Their leader sneered when he pulled back Ned's hood. "By the gods," the man muttered, stepping back in shock. "I know that. Efface, they say you're dead." "Perhaps I am," Ned answered, his voice like stone. The man laughed, though uneasily. "Dead or not, you'll pay a toll to pass here, gold, steel, or blood." Ned placed a hand on the sword at his hip. He had sworn he wouldn't draw it. He had sworn he would not yield to the fire. Yet the men's spears lowered, and instinct carried him forward. Lightbringer left its sheath with a hiss like breath. At once the sword flared alive, fire rippling down the steel. The night turned, bright as day. The brigands staggered back, their courage breaking at the sight. "What sorcery!" one of them gasped. Ned swung once. The blade cut through a spear, through wood and iron both, leaving only ash behind. The fire leapt from the strike, searing the brigand's arm. The others fled into the marsh, screaming. Ned lowered the sword, his face grim. He had not killed, but he had revealed himself. Word would spread. Melisandre's gaze lingered on him, proud and cold. "You see now, no man can stand against you. The Lord has given you more than life. He has given you victory." Ned sheathed the weapon with disgust. "No, he has given me fear. Those men will carry stories north, stories of a Stark who walks with fire. Do you know what they will call me? Not a savior, a monster." Her lips curved faintly. "Monsters win wars, honor does not." That night the dreams returned, only this time they were louder, clearer. He saw the wall, massive, ancient, stretching endless into the dark, but cracks ran through its ice, bleeding mist. From those cracks came figures pale as moonlight, eyes blue and merciless. They marched without end. He saw Jon Snow standing there, a small figure against the tide, long claw raised, the weight of the wall behind him. And Ned, he was there too, not as a father, not even as a man, but as something greater. The flames poured from his sword, and the ice melted before him. But behind the fire he saw Winterfell burning, the towers collapsing, his children screaming. When he woke, sweat ran down his face despite the freezing air. He rose and walked outside into the snow, staring northward. He knew where he must go. "We ride for the wall," he told Melisandre. She bowed her head as if she had been waiting for him to say it. "The true war begins there." As they rode through the Wolfswood, Ned felt the land itself whisper to him. The old god still lingered in the trees, and he feared what they saw in him now. Was he still of their blood, their earth, their stone, or had the fire burned that away? One night, by a weirwood tree whose red leaves dripped like blood, he knelt and prayed. "Forgive me," he whispered to the face carved in the bark. "I walk a path I did not choose. I fight for the living, as you once taught me to. Do not let me lose myself. Do not let me lose them." But the face only stared back, silent, watching. By the time the wall's shadow loomed in the distance, towering against the sky, Ned felt the weight of fate pressing hard upon him. Beyond that wall lay the true enemy. Beyond that wall waited the test that would prove whether he was chosen or cursed. And deep in his chest, the fire whispered that he already knew the answer. The wall rose higher than any memory could hold. Ned Stark had seen it before, long ago, when he brought Benjen to swear his vows. But standing beneath it now, with fire in his veins and a cursed sword at his side, it seemed even greater, even more terrible. A frozen titan, older than kings, holding back something the world had forgotten. The Black Brothers at Castle Black eyed him with suspicion the moment he arrived. He wore no lord's cloak, only rough furs. His beard had grown wild, his face hollowed from travel, yet unmistakable. The whispers spread like wildfire. "It cannot be. Ned Stark lives." Bowen Marsh, red-faced and nervous, confronted him first. This is impossible. You, Lord Stark, you were executed. We all heard it. We all saw." "You saw what you were meant to see," Melisandre cut in smoothly, her red robes a splash of fire against the snow. "But the Lord of Light returned him. He is chosen." The men murmured. Some crossed themselves before the old gods. Others spat. One or two knelt. Ned hated it all. "I am no ghost," Ned said firmly, his voice steady. "I live, but I am not here to claim titles or sow fear. I am here to see my son." Jon Snow arrived not long after, summoned from beyond the wall where he had ridden with the ranging. He entered the yard on a weary horse, snow-caked in his hair, his face hard with the weight of command. When he saw Ned standing there, cloaked in furs, eyes alive but strange, Jon froze as though struck. His mouth opened, but no words came. "It's me, Jon," Ned said, stepping forward, his throat tightening with emotions he could not name. Live." Jon dismounted slowly, his hand brushing the hilt of Longclaw. "No," he whispered. "I saw the raven. Robb told me. They said you were dead. Joffrey—" "I was," Ned admitted. His voice cracked, but he forced himself steady. "I should be bones in the ground, but the Lord of Light brought me back." Jon's eyes narrowed, searching him, studying him like a stranger. "This is sorcery." "Aye," Ned said quietly, "and I do not like it. But it is true. I saw death. I felt it. Yet here I stand, and I came here because you, Jon, are in greater danger than you know." They spoke that night in the Lord Commander's solar, the fire crackling low between them. Melisandre lingered near the shadows, her presence heavy, but Ned ignored her. His gaze stayed on Jon, the boy he had raised as a son, the boy who looked at him now with more suspicion than love. "I have seen them in my dreams," Ned said. "The dead that walk, the White Walkers, they are moving now. They will break through soon." Jon stiffened. "We've seen whites, dead men risen, but walkers—" "They are real," Ned said firmly, "and you will face them, Jon. You will lead men against them." Jon's eyes flicked to Melisandre, then back to Ned. "And you? What are you in this?" Ned hesitated. He wanted to say a father, a Stark, a man who still believes in honor, but the fire inside him spoke otherwise. "I am their foe," he admitted. "The fire chose me. I carry its sword. Lightbringer." Jon leaned back, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. "Lightbringer? That's a tale out of old Nan's stories. Azor are high. Prophecies. Stories keep us warm until they come true, Melisandre whispered. Jon's jaw tightened. You died once already. You shouldn't be here. Ned met his eyes, heavy with sorrow. I know. The wall groaned that night, as though the ice itself could sense what had arrived. Ned dreamed again, this time more vivid than ever. He stood atop the wall, Lightbringer blazing. Jon was beside him, Longclaw raised. Below them an endless army of the dead stretched as far as sight could reach, their eyes blue stars in the dark. Then he saw his children, Robb pierced by arrows, Arya cloaked in shadows, Sansa weeping in chains, Bran standing in a tree's roots, eyes white and distant, Rickon crying as the flames consumed Winterfell. The dream broke him, and he awoke with a strangled cry, fire licking at his hands as though it longed to escape. The next day, Ned stood atop the wall at dawn. The sight chilled even his burning veins. The forest beyond was too still, too quiet. The wildlings had been whispering of strange shapes, of villages emptied, of cold shadows moving at night. Winter is here, Melisandre said softly beside him, and so is your purpose. Jon came up after her, his face set, guarded. The men don't know what to make of you, he said. Some say you're a blessing, others say you're cursed. Ned's gaze stayed on the horizon. They are both right. Jon hesitated. Then he asked the question that burned between them. Are you my father still, or just some champion of fire wearing his face? Ned closed his eyes. The truth was harder than any sword. I don't know, he admitted, but I will fight for you. For the North, for all of them. That much I swear. And far to the north, beyond the frozen trees, something stirred. Eyes opened in the dark, pale, cold, merciless. The first attack came at night. Snow fell heavy and silent, the sort that swallowed sound and blinded even torches. The wall loomed above, its frozen face pale under the moon. The Black Brothers thought it just another night's watch, until the screaming began. It started with the horses. Their shrill cries echoed through the yard, echoing off the ice before falling silent all at once. Then came the thud of boots in snow, the panicked clamour of steel drawn in haste. Ned was already awake, his hand on Lightbringer, when the cold swept in, a cold deeper than death, sharp as knives in the lungs. The gates splintered. Whites poured through like a tide, skin grey and eyes burning blue, their mouths gaping with no sound, only hunger. The first Black Brother fell before he could even cry out. Another screamed as rotten hands dragged him into the dark. Ned moved without thought. Lightbringer flashed, and with it fire leapt into the night. One strike and a white burst apart, its body crumbling into ash. Another charged and the sword split it clean, the flame consuming what no steel could kill. The men of the watch froze, staring, not at the dead, but at Ned Stark, the fire burning from his blade, his eyes lit with unearthly glow. "Fight!" Ned roared, his voice carrying like thunder. "Steel won't stop them. Burn them, hack them, don't let them rise." Jon was already at his side, Longclaw cutting into the dead, though every strike seemed only to slow them. He fought with grim fury, his face pale in the firelight, until Ned struck down 3 with one burning arc. The true horror came then, not the whites, but what walked behind them. From the shadows beyond the wall, they came gliding forward, tall, thin figures pale as moonlight, with armor like frozen glass. Their eyes burned with a cold blue fire, and their steps left the ground rimed with ice. A white walker. Ned froze, his breath fogging, though the fire in him fought against the unnatural chill. The watchmen broke. Some fled, others fell to their knees, their courage dying in their throats. Even Jon faltered, his hand tightening on Longclaw, his eyes wide. Lightbringer pulsed in Ned's grip, alive, almost eager. The walker lifted its spear of black ice and with a flick shattered 3 men where they stood, their steel armor cracking as if struck by a hammer. The cold pressed harder, the fire in Ned's veins blazing in answer. And then, for the first time since his execution, Ned Stark felt no doubt. He stepped forward, his sword flaming, his voice steady. "Come then, come and see what the fire has made of me." They clashed in silence. The walker's spear struck colder than death, but Lightbringer met it with a roar of flame. The ice hissed and cracked, shards scattering like broken glass. The walker tilted its head, almost curious, then pressed harder. The impact shook Ned to his bones, but the fire surged, feeding him, driving him forward. He struck again, and again, sparks and flame leaping with every blow. The walker staggered once, surprised, as the blade's heat seared its icy flesh. But it was fast, too fast. The spear cut across Ned's arm, freezing the flesh where it touched. He gasped, nearly stumbling, but the fire in him fought the ice, burning it away. His arm smoked, skin blistering, yet he did not fall. Jon cried out, charging forward, Longclaw flashing. The Valyrian steel met the walker's weapon with a scream of power, and for the first time the cold creature faltered. Together, father and son pressed it back, fire and steel side by side. With a final desperate swing, Ned drove Lightbringer through the walker's chest. The fire erupted, consuming it whole. The creature shrieked, a sound not of this world, before exploding into shards of ice that melted instantly in the flame. The silence that followed was terrible. The remaining whites collapsed lifeless, their blue eyes extinguished. The air reeked of smoke and ash. The watchman stared at Ned in horror and awe. The fire still danced along Lightbringer's edge, casting his face in an unearthly glow. He looked less like a lord, less like a man, and more like something reborn, in judgment. Jon stood beside him, panting, his eyes fixed on his father, not with relief, but with fear. "You're not the same," Jon whispered. "Father, what are you?" Ned lowered the blade slowly. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent yard. "I am what I must be," he said. "For if I am not, we are all already dead." That night, the fires in Castle Black burned high, and the men whispered. Some called him Azor Ahai, some called him Demon. None looked him in the eye, and in the snow beyond the wall, more shadows stirred. The first battle had been only a warning. The dead were not finished. The tale of that night at Castle Black did not remain in the frozen shadows for long. Ravens carried word across the realm, and with them came fear. The letters spoke of a man returned from death, of a Stark with a flaming sword who struck down the others themselves. Some named him savior, others cursed him as heretic, an abomination of fire and shadow. But in the north, the whispers struck hardest. Robb Stark sat in Riverrun's halls when the news reached him. The parchment shook in his hand as he read it aloud to his bannermen. "Lord Eddard Stark has returned. He wields a blade of fire and claims the Lord of Light's favor. He slew a White Walker beyond the wall." The room erupted. Some laughed it off as madness. Others muttered prayers. The Greatjon roared that if it were true, the North had been given its direwolf back stronger than ever. Rose Bolton's pale eyes flickered with quiet interest, though his lips betrayed nothing. But Robb said nothing at first. He only sat there, staring at the words, his heart torn between joy and dread. If his father lived, what did that make of him, the king in the north? Far to the south, in King's Landing, the word reached Cersei and Joffrey. "They said they took his head," Joffrey spat, his face pale with more fear than fury. "I saw it mounted on a spike." Cersei's green eyes narrowed as she read the reports. "The realm believes he lives. That is all that matters. And fear of the dead will drive men to him. Varys, ever the whispering spider, only smiled. If Eddard Stark is reborn in fire, then perhaps the game has grown larger than thrones and crowns. Perhaps the gods themselves have chosen their player. Littlefinger smirked thinly, though sweat gleamed at his temple. If the dead walk, then why not the dead wolf? But the higher a wolf rises in fire, the greater the shadow it casts. Shadows can be used. At the wall, Ned could feel the weight of it all pressing down. The brothers of the Night's Watch eyed him with unease. Some knelt before him in secret, whispering prayers to the Lord of Light. Others crossed themselves before the old gods and spat when he passed. Jon grew colder by the day. He followed orders, fought beside Ned, but his eyes held doubt and distance. One night, when the torches burned low, he confronted him. "You frightened them," Jon said. "You frighten me." Ned's heart twisted. "I am still your father, Jon." Jon shook his head. "My father would never stand there with fire in his eyes, speaking of prophecy like some red priest. My father died in King's Landing. Whatever you are now, you are not him." The words cut deeper than any blade. But Ned did not argue, for in the fire's reflection even he no longer recognized himself. Then came the vision. It struck as he slept, but it felt more real than waking. He stood not at the wall, but in Winterfell's godswood. The heart tree loomed above him, its red eyes weeping. His children stood around him. Robb with his crown, Arya with her blade, Sansa in a torn gown, Bran glowing with strange power, Rickon crying, and Jon cloaked in black, his eyes full of sorrow. They looked at him not with love, but with fear. "You were ours," Arya whispered, "but now you are his." The flames consumed the weirwood. His children turned to ash, and when he screamed, only the fire answered. He woke, drenched in sweat. Lightbringer, blazing in his hand, though he had not drawn it. The fire wanted more, always more. By day the cold beyond the wall deepened. Scouts returned with reports of villages gone silent, of wildlings torn apart, of dead men rising in packs. The watch was stretched thin, their numbers too few. One morning, as snow choked the air, a horn sounded from the heights. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound froze every man where he stood. The dead were coming. Ned strode into the yard, Lightbringer already alive with fire. The men of the watch looked to him, not to their Lord Commander. Even Jon, despite his doubts, stood at his side. The gates shook as something vast struck them. Beyond, the mist boiled, blue eyes burning in the storm. Ned raised his sword high, the fire painting his face in terrible light. "The dead come for us all," he roared. "Stand with me or stand as their corpses. There is no other choice." The flames leapt higher, and for the first time, the men of the Night's Watch did not see Lord Stark, nor even a man. They saw a figure wreathed in fire, a burning wolf standing against the night, and the night was coming. The horns still echoed when the walls shuddered. Snow swirled thick as a living thing, the wind howling like wolves. Then, through the mist, the dead surged forward. Whites in their hundreds, their thousands, poured from the tree line, men, women, children, beasts, all twisted by blue fire. The brothers of the Night's Watch faltered. Some dropped their weapons, terror in their eyes. Others gripped steel and prayed to gods that had never answered. Ned Stark drew Lightbringer. The sword erupted in flame, its fire spilling across the yard, forcing the shadows back. The men gasped, half in awe, half in fear. "With me!" Ned bellowed, his voice a roar against the storm. "Hold the gate. Burn them. Burn every corpse you can." The gate splintered. They came like a wave. Whites threw themselves at the Black brothers, their rotten hands clawing, their teeth snapping. Men screamed, steel clanged, and the snow was stained red. But every strike of Lightbringer cut through the tide like a torch in dry hay. Ned fought at the front, his fire searing through corpses that would not stay down. Where he struck, the whites collapsed to ash. The men behind him rallied, following his fire as though it were a beacon in the endless night. John fought at his side, long claw biting into the dead, though without flame, his kills were never certain. Twice he would have fallen if not for Ned's blades searing through the foes that clutched him, yet John never thanked him. He only fought harder, his face set in grim defiance. And then the walkers came. 5 of them, tall and thin, their armor gleaming like frozen rivers, their eyes burning with cold fire. The temperature dropped, breath freezing in the air, snow hissing as it touched the ground. The whites pulled back, forming a silent ring. The walkers advanced. Ned felt the fire inside him surge, hot and eager, as if the sword itself recognized its true enemy. He stepped forward, his breath steaming. "Stay back," he told John. "I won't," John snapped. "You must," Ned said, his eyes never leaving the approaching figures. "If I fall, you live. If you fall, then the world dies." John's mouth tightened, but he obeyed, retreating reluctantly as the first walker raised its spear. The clash was like a storm breaking, ice met flame, sparks screaming. Into the air, each blow shook the earth. The walkers' strikes were swift, precise, filled with unnatural grace, but Lightbringer burned hotter, brighter, each swing scattering shards of frost. Still, they pressed him. Another joined, then another, circling like wolves around prey. Their weapons struck in unison, forcing him back step by step. Fire seared, but cold pressed harder. His arm bled from a gash that froze even as it cut, his breath ragged, his legs heavy. He was losing. Then the vision came again, not as a dream, but in the midst of battle. The fire in him flared, and he saw Rob pierced by arrows, Arya cloaked. In shadows, Bran staring with white eyes. He saw John, older, harder, standing before a great host of the dead, the wall shattered behind him. And he heard a voice, soft, cruel, undeniable. "Light demands sacrifice." Ned roared, fury and fire surging. He struck with both hands, Lightbringer blazing brighter than ever. The fire leapt from the blade, engulfing one walker whole. It shrieked as it crumbled into ice and ash. Another fell beneath his blade, fire splitting it apart. The others drew. Back their blue eyes narrowed. They hissed in some tongue not meant for men, then turned and vanished into the storm. The whites collapsed, lifeless once more. Silence fell. The yard was littered with corpses and ash, the air stinking of smoke and blood. Dozens of black brothers lay dead, their eyes still wide with terror. Those who lived looked at Ned as though he were something not quite human. John approached, his face pale, his hands shaking with the gore of battle. You drove them back." Ned sheathed Lightbringer, though the fire still flickered along its edge, refusing to die. He looked at his son, his heart breaking. "Not enough," Ned said. "This was only a taste. They were testing us. Next time they will come with more, and the wall will not hold forever." John's jaw clenched. "Then what do we do?" Ned's eyes burned in the firelight. "We gather the north. We gather all who will fight, or there will be no realm left to save." But as he spoke, the fire whispered again. Sacrifice. It would not stop. It would never stop. And Ned Stark, once the most honorable man in Westeros, began to fear what the fire would one day demand of him. The wall held, but only just. The men of the Night's Watch counted their dead in silence, burying bodies in pits too shallow, praying. They would not rise again. Ravens flew south with word of the battle, carrying tales that spread faster than truth could catch them. In Winterfell, bannermen whispered, "The Warden of the North walks again," but not as he was. In Riverrun, Robbie clenched the Raven's letter in his fist until his knuckles bled, torn between a son's joy and a king's terror. In King's Landing, Cersei drank deep and muttered that fire and ice alike were coming for her crown. and beyond the sea, a young woman with silver hair heard the rumors, and the name Stark burned in her mind. At Castle Black, Ned Stark grew, heavier with every day. The fire in his veins never dimmed, it grew. He saw visions each night, flames twisting into faces he loved. Robb bleeding in the rain. Arya's eyes dark with vengeance. Sansa screaming in chains. Jon alone at the wall, bearing a weight no man should. The fire never showed him peace, only sacrifice. And then came the dream he could not escape. He stood in the yard, his children before him, the fire in his hand. Melisandre's voice whispered from the flames, "Lightbringer must be tempered with the heart of what you love most. Only then will it be strong enough to end the long night." He saw himself striking Robb down. He saw Arya's blood spilling on snow. He saw Jon, his own son, pierced through by fire. And every vision ended with the same truth. The dead defeated, the night broken, but only because the wolf had burned what he could never bear to lose. Ned woke screaming, Lightbringer blazing in his hand, fire dripping like blood. Jon rushed in, dragging the sword from him before it set the keep aflame. "You're losing yourself," Jon said, voice trembling, with anger and fear. "You're not my father anymore. You're something else. And I don't know if it's worth saving." Ned wept, though the fire hissed against his tears. "I don't want this. I never wanted this. But if I turn from it, you will all die." Jon shook his head. "Or maybe if you follow it, we will." The final blow came with the second great attack. The wall shook like thunder as the dead returned, more than before, led by walkers whose eyes burned with endless night. This time they did not test. They came to break. Ned fought like a man possessed, Lightbringer blazing so hot it split the snow into steam. Every wight he struck turned to ash. Every walker he met, he burned to nothing. Men followed him, emboldened, until the yard looked more like a forge than a battlefield. But for every foe he felled, 10 more came. The gates splintered, cracks running through the wall itself. Jon was at his side, Longclaw flashing, his face white with frost and firelight. Together, father and son carved a path, but it was not enough. Then the fire inside Ned surged, stronger than ever, louder than thought, drowning even the screams around him. He heard the voice again, merciless, certain. "Sacrifice, give me what you love, and the night will fall." He looked at Jon, his son, his blood, his greatest shame and his greatest pride. The fire demanded it, his heart's love, the price of Lightbringer. With Jon's death, the sword would burn with final strength, strong enough to end the long night. Ned raised the blade, his arms shaking. His son stood before him, exhausted, bleeding, unknowing. Jon's eyes met his, and in that moment, Ned saw not a weapon, not a prophecy, but his boy. "No," Ned whispered. His voice broke, but his resolve held. "You will not have him. You will not take what I love, not for this." The fire screamed inside him, tearing at his soul, burning his flesh from within. He fell to his knees, Lightbringer blazing so hot it cracked the stones beneath him. The walkers hissed, retreating from its heat, but the fire no longer answered. His will. Jon rushed to him, dropping Longclaw, grasping his father's shoulders as the light consumed him. "Father!" Ned's face twisted with pain, but his eyes were his own again. Gentle, human, stark. "Remember, Jon," he whispered, voice fading beneath the roar. "Honor is not weakness, even in fire. We choose who we are." And then the fire burst. Outward, a wave of flames swept the yard, incinerating the wights, shattering the walkers into shards of ice. The night howled and broke, retreating back into the storm. When the flames died, only ashes remained where Ned Stark had knelt. The wall still stood, though scarred. The dead had been driven back, for now. Jon Snow rose slowly, his face streaked with soot and tears. Lightbringer lay in the ashes, its fire gone, its steel dull. He picked it up, heavy in his hand, and, looked north, where the storm still gathered. The men of the watch whispered of what they had seen. Some said Eddard Stark had been Azor Ahai, the Lord of Light's chosen. Others said he was a demon who burned himself away. But Jon said nothing. He only sheathed the dead sword at his side, the weight of fire and sacrifice now his to bear. But Jon said nothing. He only sheathed the dead sword at his side, the weight of fire and sacrifice now his to bear. For the long night had not ended, it had only begun.